Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. As the presidential race enters its final stretch, candidates are sharpening their focus on key social policies, issues that strike directly at the everyday lives of voters. The second televised debate on Friday was the last opportunity for candidates to sway public opinion before the pre-election polling blackout. The debate saw sharpened attacks and competing visions on how to address South Korea's most pressing social challenges, from deepening social divides and pension sustainability to healthcare reform and administrative capital relocation as well. So to help us unpack the key moments and implications, we connect to Choi Hyunsun, professor of public administration at Myongji University. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us is Kim Mok-yeon, assistant professor of the KDI School of Public Policy and Management. Great to see you.
Great to see you again.
So let's begin our discussion, Professor Choi. So on the debate itself. So on Friday, four presidential candidates held their second televised debate. And compared to the first debate, the negative attacks seemed to kind of intensify. How did you perceive the shift in tone? And also, since this was the final debate before the ban on polling results, do you think it could influence undecided voters?
First of all, I'm surprised how fast time goes. Only 8 days left this important away from this important presidential election. I think the public opinion polls will be stopped from the May 28th. So I think the second debate was very important. But unfortunately, I could say negative campaign worked somewhat. I think that in the second televised presidential debate, we can see how intensified, especially among the candidates, especially they criticize each other, especially like PPP candidate Kim Mok-yeon and then the Reform Party candidate Lee Jae-myung maybe criticize much about the front runner Lee Jae-myung's policy proposal and past administrative decisions. Also, unfortunately, we could see about Kim criticized about the individual family history of Lee Jae-myung because this is about some kind of some bad things and lie against ethics, something like that. But also at the same time, the Lee Jae-myung criticized Kim about the far-right politics. I think that he argue maybe Kim still support maybe use martial law or something like that. So that is maybe not good way how we can see the campaign. I think unfortunately this negative campaign worked somewhat because if we see the latest Gallup Korea poll, actually the Lee dropped 6% and Kim rising 7%, which is there the margin is narrowed down. I think I think it's so bad. I hope the third maybe debate and in the voting time, maybe our citizens in Korea maybe realize how important this president election rather than the negative campaign. We must see the policy. I think that this is just the last chance we can see the opinion poll. So I think the second debate was very important.
Right, and like you said, largely it was seeing intensified negative campaigning in that. Now, let's get into the details, the root causes of the division right now. So during the second debate, which was focused on social issues, progressive candidates cited polarization and low growth as the main causes of societal division, while conservative candidates pointed out to corruption, dishonesty, and hate-based framing. Professor Kim, in your view, what is the primary cause of division in South Korean society?
I think conservative perspective and both like progressive and conservative perspective, they contain valid points. So one is economic issue, and another thing is like conservative parties recommended it's hate-driven narratives. They both do contribute to social division. However, I would argue that economic factors serve as more fundamental causes, while hate-driven narratives function as an amplifying mechanism that intensify polarization rather than originate it. So when I say economic issue, it's not simply about economic inequality, because South Korea has experienced economic inequality for decades, but the current level of social division is relatively a recent phenomenon. So the more fundamental cause is, I would argue, two key factors. So one is declining economic opportunities, so which is different from static economic inequality. So while, economic inequality measure unequal distribution of wealth and resources at a single point of time, declining opportunity requires examining trends over time. So a growing population in South Korea, especially younger generation, face diminishing prospect for securing stable employment or middle-class lifestyle despite working harder than previous generation. So if you consider the past generation could obtain secure jobs, support families, have even comfortable retirements without exceptional credentials. But today's young people, they work harder to get into the good university and have all these certificates, but they achieve much less. So this frustration, the disappearance of opportunities that were previously accessible, drives some of the discriminatory attitudes and prejudice against, minorities or other groups. But the problem is that not everyone experiencing declining opportunities turns to hatred of others. This is where culture becomes crucial. So numerous scientific studies worldwide show that hostility toward immigrants or racial minority, it could be sexual minorities, have intensified, but this isn't primarily driven by people with lower education or lower income, so-called working class. Instead, it's fueled by those people who perceive that their privilege are threatened by these minorities. And privilege here refers to advantaged access to resources based on their identity markers. It could be being men or being belonging to certain racial group or social classes. And progressive social movements that we had across high-income countries have challenged many of these previously unquestioned privilege. And this status threat generates frustration that manifests into hostility toward other groups. So fundamental cause, in my perspective, of social division, not just in Korean society, but globally, stems from combination of two factors: declining social opportunities and feelings of status threat, the belief that certain advantage should be deserved, but they're no longer available. So I would
Right.
say two factors will be the fundamental causes.
All right. Thank you for the sharp analysis of the current situation. Now, so each candidate, going back to the debate, each candidate proposed a different solution for national unity. Professor Choi, what were the key differences in their approaches? And also, could you tell us, do you believe any of the proposed plans could effectively reduce the current polarization?
It is a very hard issue, so I'm not sure about if their proposal can solve this problem. But Lee Jae-myung identified, as Professor Kim explained, polarization and significant disparity is the root cause of the social conflicts. So he suggests about maybe we need growth. We need growth again, and through the maybe public investment or some kind of the other investment for the revitalizing like our economy. So the maybe intelligence, the artificial intelligence, and maybe renewable energy and cultural content industry. He suggests to maintain our growth, to reduce our social division. Kim Mun-soo also proposed about some economic revitalization through the deregulation and tax cuts and job creation, but he criticized about the dishonesty and lies of the candidate Lee Jae-myung. So this maybe he says about maybe similar or a little different, but a similar approach about economy is important, but he says about the lying and the dishonesty is not good. That's just the root cause of the social division. So that is his comment. Lee Jun-suk also say about make minimum government. So I think we reduce the government and their bureaucratic issue. Maybe we can making better, efficient society. Also, Kwon Young-guk also suggests about the labor rights and the social equity. I think they have all the main issues. I think but the more feasible maybe idea, maybe based on the polarization issue and the social disparity issue, based on that, they propose economic growth. That is a good way of. I think whether public investment or the deregulation, I think the voters will choose which one is better.
So they had laid out a lot of ideas, and this contrast really shows how they envision healing a divided society, and a lot of differences in terms of philosophy. Now let's also touch upon pension reform. Lee Jae-myung and Kwon Young-guk emphasized strengthening old age security, while Kim Moon-soo and Lee Jun-seok also focused on easing the burden on younger generations. Professor Kim, how do you assess these approaches? And also, what would be a realistic pension reform look like?
So I think that both strengthening old age security and financial burden, or reducing financial burden on the younger generation are critical objectives, but the candidates frame these as contradictory goals, but they're not necessarily incompatible. These kind of false dichotomy actually obscure potential solutions that can address both concerns at the same time. So structural reforms, we need to gradually increase the retirement age to reflect increased life expectancy, but we must be strategic about this implementation. The key is coupling this change with a shift toward performance-based salary system rather than seniority-based salary system. Korea's current workplace culture where compensation increases automatically with age, regardless of your productivity, creates a disconnect between contribution and reward that undermines both economic efficiency and pension sustainability. So this change would address intergenerational equity concerns. And by moving to performance-based compensation, we can actually make it economically viable for employers to retain older workers while ensuring that those workers are contributing meaningfully to productivity. So these address concern that simply raising retirement age forces companies to pay higher wages for potentially lower productivity. And another thing is that we need policies that increase female labor force participation. And then you asked me about old age pensions sustainability, and then younger people's financial burden, and why am I talking about female labor force participation? But Korea has one of the lowest female labor force participation among high-income countries, and representing enormous untapped potential for economic growth and pension contributions. So this connects directly to workplace reforms by creating more flexible work, family environments, and moving away from the rigid seniority system that often disadvantage women's career progression. We can address not just female labor force participation, but as well as pension sustainability.
Right. So,
we must be realistic about the implementation challenges. Any major pension reforms will face resistance from various groups. So key is framing this as not as a zero-sum battle between generations, but as a comprehensive modernization of Korean economic and social systems. So when we strengthening the pension sustainability while reforming workplace practices, we're not just ensuring retirement security, we're creating more dynamic and equitable economy that benefits everyone.
right. So it's not really a yes or no situation. It's all intertwined and connected. And we should, like you said, have boosting female labor force as well as having a performance-based retirement age system would be definitely a good help. Now, healthcare was another major focus in the debate. All candidates have emphasized differentiating their healthcare policies from those of the Yoon Suk-yeol administration, including reconsidering the expansion of medical school admissions. Lee Jae-myung and Kwon Young-guk focused on strengthening public healthcare, while Kim Moon-soo and Lee Jun-seok emphasized enhancing medical professionalism. So, Professor Choi, from a social integration perspective, do you find these approaches appropriate to restore the healthcare system?
I think if we want to overcome the tragedy, maybe bureaucratic tragedy in the Yoon's administration about this medical issue and health issue, I think we must focus on how we can make a consensus. In terms of that, the consensus, Lee Jae-myung maybe propose about the building social consensus process for the medical school quota. It's a very important issue. While the Kim Mun-soo maybe propose about the enhancing medical professional expertise and they involved in the decision making. Maybe he would make a presidential commission for the future health and the medical issue. So I think the both strong candidates maybe suggest about we could overcome with some consensus building process. I think but Kim Mun-soo's idea is more similar to the Yoon administration's commission already we have. It doesn't work. So I think from the maybe bottom, we must maybe make a consensus and we make a process again. It would take a little time, but already 2 years passed. So I think if not, maybe how can we persuade maybe doctors and the many practices? So I think this is an important issue for our future. Maybe new government should solve in the next 6 months about this issue. I think the consensus building is very important. I think both candidates maybe focus on that, how they can commit the consensus building.
So let's hope to see some breakthrough in the next administration that's coming in. Now, so as we've discussed, well, largely candidates have been divided in terms of policies. Interestingly, there's one major social pledge where all candidates showed rare unity, and it was the relocation of the administrative capital to Sejong City. Now, although this pledge resurfaces in every election, Professor Kim, what are the practical hurdles to making this actually happen?
So, I mean, my personal opinion, I might be wrong, but it is political unwillingness. And when I say political unwillingness, it operates on multiple levels. At the leadership level, presidents may genuinely support relocation during campaigns, but once in office, they face enormous practical and political costs. The scale of this type of project, which could last multiple years, often exceed the political capital any single administration is willing to invest. And another issue is that, there has been deep resistance from Seoul-based politicians, bureaucrats, and interest groups who benefit from the current concentration of power. And these stakeholders will resist relocation, not just because personal inconvenience, but because it threatens their accumulated advantage and influence. And of course, beyond political unwillingness, there are significant constitutional and legal hurdles and resistance from citizens in metropolitan area who are concerned about, housing prices. And to succeed, Korea would need a president willing to make these, relocation to Sejong as their defining legacy project, combined with, cross-party consensus and sustained public pressure. So until that fundamental political dynamic changes, we're likely to see these promises continue appearing during the elections and campaigns without meaningful progress toward realization.
Right, so a very strong willingness would be necessary to push forward with this pledge. Now, criticism has been lingering over many pledges. While candidates have rolled out a lot of social pledges, including those related to healthcare, elder care, critics argue that they're largely aimed more at attracting votes than offering actual viable solutions. So, Professor Kim, in your view, what should be the top priority among these social policy pledges?
So, if you're asking about my personal opinion, it could be demographic challenges that we have. But if you're asking me about my impression about the discussion and what is the most pressing issue that was discussed in the entire discussion, the second debate, it was quite difficult to grasp what they were actually pursuing because, as Professor Choi mentioned, these candidates spend maybe 1 or 2 sentences talking about the actual topic, but the remaining 99% of their time attacking each other. So rather than engaging in constructive and healthy discussion, I didn't get to hear any specific and concrete plans. If I have to talk about these demographic changes, of course, first, comprehensive support for families should be the top priority. And as we all know, Korea has one of the lowest fertility in the world, and this isn't just about individual choice. It's about structural barriers that make it increasingly difficult to have family and raise children. And this means that not just financial support, but creating complete ecosystem, accessible daycare, parental leave policies that do not penalize career, and workplace culture that accommodates this type of family responsibilities. And then second, which were not so much mentioned during the discussion, is that elderly care infrastructure is becoming a critical issue as we get rapidly aging. And we need integrated system that provide both institutional care for those who need it and support for families caring for elderly relatives at home. This isn't just about building, homes and facilities for the elderly. It's about creating, again, sustainable and care models that do not bankrupt families. And what's crucial is that these aren't separate issues and they're interconnected challenges that require coordinated approaches. For example, childcare policy I mentioned affects women's labor force participation, and then it again leads to pension sustainability. And the problem is that campaign debates, they tend to fragment this issue into competing priorities rather than presenting them as a part of integrated social policy framework. So without hearing this substantial policy discussion from the candidates, it's difficult to evaluate what they understand these interconnected connections of these issues, or simply offering isolated promises. So what would be great to hear from these candidates, not just about what they promise to spend money on, but how they plan to actualize or create sustainable system that address Korea's demographic crisis.
Right. So let's hope for the last coming debate there would be less political wrangling and more fruitful discussions on policies and how to implement them moving forward. Now, as for now, we will have to wrap up our discussion here at this point. But thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Professor Kim and Professor Choi. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.